Most Americans insist that the country's leaders may love power, but they would never do what the tyrannical leaders of the past have done. Really? You sure about that? History may not repeat, but it sure does rhyme, and right now, Mother Goose is having a field day. Rosie the Riveter here, dropping more truth bombs to blow your mind. We've been told of the dictators and tyrants in history, but have you really studied some of their acts they did to obtain and keep power? Concerned of losing his control over the Israelite slaves in Egypt due to the increasing population, the Pharaoh ordered all male Israelite babies to be killed immediately upon birth. Threatened by the report of the birth of a new king, Harold ordered the killing of all male babies under age 2 to prevent the loss of his throne. Rome was set ablaze, reportedly by Nero's hand, to make way for his new palace. When the city burned, Nero fiddled on his roof. To deflect from his involvement, Nero blamed the Christians, turning Romans against them. Christians were captured and dragged into the Colosseum to fight the lions for the people's enjoyment, while others were burned alive on stakes to light the streets. In the name of equity, Joseph Stalin took farms away from the Ukrainian farmers. The people actually knew how to work the land and gave it to the state-run entities. As a result, millions of people died of starvation. Trying to emulate Stalin's communal experiment, Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, which was conducted during 1959 to 1962, allowed government officials to force the Chinese people to change their work habits, relying more on massive community labor instead of machines. To increase the labor force, communal kitchens were organized to permit the women to work for the government instead of taking care of the needs of the family, focusing on production of industry over food. After 3 years, 20 million people were dead. As Adolf Hitler rose to power, he and his Nazi propaganda machine promoted the elimination of mentally and physically handicapped people, including little children. Finally, realizing the execution of their kids was wrong, the people pushed back. To hold on to his power, Hitler unified the people by blaming the Jews for all of Germany's problems, including spreading diseases, and turned his execution tactics on them. Jews, political opponents, Soviet criminals, handicapped, Jehovah's Witnesses, and homosexuals, over 17 million total, were tortured, starved, had medical experiments performed on them against their will, and outright massacred.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
When the German parliament, known as Reichstag, was burned, Hitler and the Nazis seized the opportunity to blame their political opponents, using the incident as a springboard to institute emergency legislation which removed the people's constitutional rights. Even closer to home, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau loves supporting dissenters in other countries, but when the public political opposition came to his doorstep, He immediately flexed his political muscles. In response to the 2021 Freedom Convoys protesting vaccine mandates, he demonized the dissenters with the media's help, froze their bank accounts, and squashed all opposition after refusing to even talk to the protesters. So, what do you say to those Americans who say, but our government would never go that far? Newsflash! All governments eventually do this to their people, and those who crave and thrive on power always make it to the top. What made America so unique when the Declaration of Independence was proclaimed and the Constitution was signed was it was put the control of the government in the hands of we the people, to be elected by, monitored by, and held accountable by the citizens of the country. Tyrants, dictators, and even monarchies eventually oppress the people in efforts to keep their power because they have no one to answer to. In essence, they're their own gods. The Constitution of the United States was specifically designed to reverse that. Progressive President Woodrow Wilson, a former educator and president of Princeton College, started America down the path of rewriting our history, convincing the new generations that we were not a country founded on Christian Judeo beliefs and should be moved to one of a progressive, or more accurately, socialist agenda. America's higher educational institutions all began as trading centers for ministers and missionaries, and not to just the settlers, but in efforts to spread the gospel to the Native Americans. Over the years, secularism infected those institutions, and Wilson transformed Princeton from a Presbyterian training school to one focused on science and academia. While these disciplines are needed, it was done at the expense of replacing, not coinciding with, the religious basis of the already established college and universities, which I would say was completely intentional. The development of some of America's most prestigious colleges of today have fascinating beginnings and are worth exploring, which I did in my liberating letter, Higher Education, which I have linked in the description below. Because of the transformation in our universities, which infected our public schools with the inception of the Department of Education in 1979, the generations of Americans have been taught to believe not only was God not part of our founding, he has nothing to do with our governing now.
Horse hockey.
Once you remove God, or any entity for that matter, from his role as authority over government, all boundaries, limitations, and true humanity are eliminated and replaced with the concept of retaining power at all costs, using their own deceptive boundaries, limitations, and calls for compassion to manipulate the people. On the other hand, as they rewrite American history and remove God, they also whitewash the atrocities of people like Stalin, Mao, and Hitler. Why? Any conservative or anyone daring to go against the progressive agenda is automatically labeled and demonized as a Nazi. Most people know that the label is bad, but do they actually know why? Do they have any understanding at all what the Nazis truly did? Do they actually recognize Nazi behavior when they see it? Obviously, no, which answers the question as to why it's not taught in schools. As I discussed in my vlog on term limits, even King George III was in awe of President George Washington's self-limitation of remaining president, voluntarily walking away from power after 2 terms. The founder of the Democratic Party, President Andrew Jackson, wanted that power so badly he removed us from the road of divine providence to put us on the dangerous path of manifest destiny. Entering the White House, a poor man, he and his elitist friends stole Native American land for their own profit, while forcing the tribes westward to live in horrible conditions, experience uncalled for suffering, and die of starvation. Jackson left the White House a millionaire. We have forgotten, and I would say purposely so, that the constitutional duty of the chief executive, i.e., the president, is to enforce the laws enacted by Congress and protect the country from her enemies, both foreign and domestic. The president does not have the power to be the one setting the agenda. The founders purposely set it up that way. We, the people, are given that task, achieving it through those we elect to Congress. Likewise, the president does not have the constitutional authority to implement mandates forcing people to comply to orders that has not been passed by Congress. So, if you look at the atrocities that have happened across the globe since the beginning of time, and even happening today, and say it couldn't happen here, why? Understanding we are a sinful people, what gives you that confidence? For me, there is one thing that makes America different, and that may keep us from going down the same road all the other countries have. It's the one thing the country was built on, and it is the only way out of this. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. I'm Rosie the Riveter, and that's my 2 cents. But what do you think? Leave your comments down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You can find all my videos and liberating letters, along with links to hundreds of articles fighting fake news and propaganda, including the ones I referenced in this video on thefactspaper.com. Don't lose heart. We are winning. We will be great again. We can do it.